Hey everyone, this is Matthew Kemp. Welcome to Theology on the Ground and the daily thought for my quiet time. So, yesterday we were going over the first part of John chapter 4 and Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well. And we saw that there's a little bit of back and forth and a little bit of antagonism on her part. There's conflicts between the Jews, Jesus would be a Jew, and the Samaritans, she's a Samaritan. They're in Samaria, they're at a well getting water. And so we saw her bring up different things, um, such as, hey, why are you a Jew helping me, a Samaritan, since we don't have any dealings? And hey, did you know that this is actually a well that was put here by the patriarch Jacob, who, Israel descends from? So, hey, we're pretty important here in Samaria. We've got stuff from the patriarchs. And Jesus tried to switch the conversation over to talking about living water, eternal life, which he was going to give. And she said, okay, well, give me this water. And so we pick it up in verse 16. Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus answered her, you are right in saying, I have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true. Now, a couple different ways to read this. She could, through serial divorce and remarriage, have had 5 husbands. She also could have, through unfortunate widowhood, had 5 husbands. In any case, the man that she's living with now, it's not her husband, clearly seems to be a sinful arrangement. And so I think Jesus here is calling her out in a gentle way about her sin, because he knows all things, because he can see into people's hearts, because he is God incarnate. He knows that her current way of living is not honoring and glorifying to God. I think we should all note that evangelism is going to come with a component of calling people out, challenging them that they are not right with God. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. She kind of goes back to the Jew versus Samaritan thing. Our fathers, right, the patriarchs, worshipped on this mountain. But you say Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship, right? The temple came to Jerusalem and is still there in the time of Jesus. It would be destroyed around AD 70. But at the moment, there'd be, I think, about 6 festivals a year where people, they were pilgrimage feasts. People would have to come back to Jerusalem to worship, even the Jews who lived in other parts of Judea. It's called Judea at the time. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, he who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. So ultimately, this conversation sort of culminates in Jesus then pointing back to himself, as is so common in John's gospel. Hey, yeah, you're right to wait for the Messiah. He's here. I'm him. I'm the Messiah. That's where the conversation ends. It's so interesting that it turned to worship there. And so Jesus is excuse me, Jesus taking the focus away from the form and the formality of worship. And where do you worship? Do you worship in Jerusalem? Do you worship in the temple? Do you worship at church? Do you worship on this mountain where the patriarchs worshiped? Where do you worship? Where are there sacred places? And excuse me, the focus is away from that and back on who are you worshiping and how are you worshiping. And the person to worship is the Father, and then the way of worshiping is in spirit and in truth. So it's all very important that, it's not, physical things that we come up to an altar and offer incense or sacrifice an animal, right? Obviously, Hebrews goes into that in great detail that, Jesus is the once and for all sacrifice for sins. So now, God is spirit, and those who worship him worship in spirit and in truth. And so worship encapsulates, everything that happens in our day-to-day lives. So that's the story of the woman at the well. We did part 1 yesterday, part 2 today. Fantastic story, fantastic conversation that Jesus had. And I'm sure I didn't really even scratch the surface of it. Hope it was encouraging to you. And Lord willing, I will see all you guys again tomorrow.